All right, we're just gonna start this off. Here is the first clip. If you want to see what the build looks like with mostly all blue gear, running a tier 16 map, we'll just let that play out for you. And then after that, I will show the build with a little bit more investment, killing an Uber. This is the update for 325 Settlers of Kalgur for my Fire Trap / Frostblink Ignite Elementalist. It is my favorite League starter. I have played many of them, and this is my favorite. Things that you might like about this build: if you play it properly, it can be very, very fast. It gets a good chunk of damage relatively comfortably. You can kill, as you see in the background right now. You can do T16 maps with literally blue gear. Once you get a moderate investment, bossing actually becomes very comfortable. It's not a giga insta one-shotter on bosses, but it does get very comfortable because it is ignite damage over time. You throw one little trap and then you run around and watch the damage happen. Things that you might not like: the physical damage mitigation until you get that lightning coil can feel a little weak unless you focus on getting a rare body armor that has at least some physical mitigation, and ideally that Eldritch Implicit. Unfortunately, we lost the Gravicious Craft, so you do have to go for the Eldritch Implicit to get some of that back. But then again, you do really want to go for the lightning coil after that. Really, once you have that though, the build is in a pretty comfortable spot. I have focused a lot on the changes this patch to make it as few buttons as possible and relying even less on uniques, but I am showing you guys the uniques that you can aim for. There is a lot of content that I have already out there. I do strongly advocate watch the backlog of guides on this. There are literally 4, 5, 6 hours of guides on YouTube that I have put on the channel. I'll link it all below if you want to know in absolute depth how the build works and like where it's come from. I think it's really important actually to understand the history of the build and how I've changed it to understand where we are right now. And in my opinion, this is by far the best version of this build. I have learned a lot about build making in the past year specifically, and I think this version I am very proud of, and I think it's in a very good place. Concerns: if you're a hardcore player, anything like that, this is not a hardcore build, this is a softcore build. I think the defenses are very adequate for a league start scenario for the first few days in a league start in softcore. You won't be super squishy as long as you play it properly. Very, very important is understanding the cooldown of Frostblink. I put this in every single video and build guide for this build. But yeah, the way that Frostblink works is, a lot of people don't understand this, is it cools down faster the more enemies that are in the area. And Frostblink has a start and ending area, and it counts both of those areas. As long as there are enemies in those areas, ideally you blink from one pack into another. So your goal is to kind of walk up on like 2 packs up here. You want to walk kind of like right here, and then your Frostblink will go off here, and then you'll land right here. And because of Ignite proliferation support, then the Ignites will hit these guys and it'll hit these guys. And because your Frostblink blinked into and away from big pack of monsters, the cooldown will be much, much faster. And you can demonstrate this very quickly. So you can see 2.6 second cooldown. Yes, waiting 2.6 seconds, very annoying. If you absolutely have to, if you do miss aim it or something, you can throw a fire trap that will go off when it's near an enemy, and that will do plenty of damage and kill the whole pack. But if you do this properly, you can Frostblink from a pack into another pack, and look how fast the cooldown is. Again, from a pack into another pack ideally. Well, there's only 1 pack of monsters there, but again, dense pack, look how fast it is. And that's really all you have to do, and you can chain these, and it'll feel really, really good. And because of Ignite proliferation, it'll get all of the stragglers, and they will die. And the thing is, you don't have to wait for the next pack, right? So if the cooldown is a little bit off, you can kind of walk past the pack and get into the next one, and you'll feel really good. We do run a Quartz Flask, so you have phasing, and that's okay. And you should have enough baseline defense once the build is put together that is pretty comfortable and easy to do. Now, if you do find a scary rare, well, not in this case. If you do find a scary rare, then you do want to curse it and then throw a fire trap, and then you can Frostblink as well to get that combustion. When hit with all of that, you'll do plenty of damage that will kill the rare behind you. It is damage over time, so you could be a little annoyed that you have to go back and pick something up behind you, but that's just the name of the game. And yeah, that is the way that she works. So yeah, just to make that all clear. So if I see a rare, throw a fire trap, throw a curse on them, and we're good to go. So that's just the play style, just to make that really clear. Okay, so you either like the build or you're interested in it or you're not. Again, there's a whole backlog. I don't know, I'm just putting all those disclaimers in here because League Start build conversation is what it is. But I am very proud of this build. I think this is by far the best version of it that I put out. We have had to make some very interesting changes based on the patch notes. I always find this a really fun process, is adapting. Sometimes builds don't survive, sometimes they do. And this build very much survived, and I think this is the best version of it. So let's get into the changes. If you have played this build before, this is where you will be very interested. Again, there will be tons of resources linked below. There is a leveling video that Havoc did. There is a full document that talks about how to level the build. There's a whole Google Doc that I wrote when I first wrote this build guide. And then in the notes section, there is all of this. And then, of course, there will be a full Maxroll guide. I did that last league, and I'm going to update it with these changes. So that will be linked below as soon as I update it. That'll probably be tomorrow morning after I post this video. So not right away, but you'll see that updated before league start. But these notes should be relatively updated and should be good to go. So yeah, what are the changes? What are the challenges? What happened? Big one, Divine Blessing removed. So for most Elementalist, Witch, Templar, I don't know, so many builds. I would say most of the builds that I've played in the past year and a half use Divine Blessing. The tech in the past has been reserve all of your mana. Then you can use Eldritch Battery to spend Energy Shield instead of mana. And then with Divine Blessing, you are able to temporarily cast an aura with a cooldown, or well, not with a cooldown, but with a timer, with that gigantic Energy Shield pool. And that way you could basically get a free aura at the cost of running Eldritch Battery, having a good ES pool. So that got removed entirely. Now, there are alternatives. There's this whole thing, the marionettes with the specters. I really didn't want to do that. Kind of the nice thing of the previous version of this build is we were reserving an aura that was not doing that much. This version is with the Divine Blessing support. And this is what we did. We used to cast Divine Blessing, or sorry, you can't see it right there. Divine Blessing, right? So it would be a temporary aura with a cooldown. And then you can see I spend my ES, and that's what happens. And that's Divine Blessing. That is going away. The cool thing here, right? You get restrictions, patch note changes, stuff happens. We actually don't get that much out of Grace. Grace was just like nice to have. Honestly, if I could have gotten more armor and could have run Determination instead of Grace, actually the first version of this build actually ran Determination. I would have preferred that. So if we turn off Grace, you'll see that we go from 62% evasion to 31% evasion. And actually the version of the POB, we go for a little bit more evasion. So the change is not as striking. That, in terms of our actual EHP, is not game changing. We don't have enough evasion that's like, we go from 72 also to 53 if we have our flasks up. I think that's a little bit more indicative, right? So 72 to 53 with our flasks up, right? Like Grace is nice, but we can't afford to drop it. So basically all I did is I dropped Grace and I put in Malevolence as a permanent aura instead. The other thing that I did that's really nice to kind of make up for that, we kind of get some defenses back this way, is we are now going to run Flesh and Stone. So actually, I've played so many versions of this build. We can go through some history lesson right now. The original version of the build looked like this. You'll notice that it's very, very different looking. And Dawnbreaker is an option as well. And the original version did run Flesh and Stone. So the old version of it, while you're in Sand Stance, says enemies that are outside of the circle will deal less damage to you. But this is kind of a pseudo melee build, right? So and this circle's pretty big. I would say that most of the monsters that you're going to be worrying about probably within this circle. The change to Flesh and Stone is now the closer they are to you, the less damage they deal. And since we are a pseudo melee build with, Frostblinking into packs of monsters, that's actually really nice. That's just going to be less damage from attacks from monsters coming in and hitting us melee-wise. And I think that more than makes up for the loss of Grace. And you can see actually, I have a chunk of mana right here, and we actually get a little bit of leeway in our mana in the change next patch. I did make it so now we are running Flesh and Stone, Skitterbots, Tempest Shield, and Malevolence. Those are our mana reservation auras, and it's actually pretty darn comfortable. Previously, I was running Vitality when I could squeeze it in, but we are dropping Vitality entirely for an Enduring Cry. We'll get to that in a second. So yeah, that's the big mana reservation changes right there. So yeah, we lose Grace, but the nice thing is, particularly for people that don't like pressing buttons, and myself included, pressing that Divine Blessing occasionally is really, really annoying. I think everyone kind of hated it, but we put up with it because it was so strong. And now we can drop that entirely and we don't worry about pressing that additional button. Feels really, really nice. Going back to only using permanent auras, the only temporary buffs we have now are just, Arcanist Brand for our curses. So that's the change right there of our reservation. Next one up is Infernal Cry no longer works for the build. So previously we used Infernal Cry to put Covered in Ash on the enemies. This also allows us to explode packs of monsters, which is really, really nice. And the Covered in Ash is increased damage taken. Specifically increased fire damage taken on the monsters. The thing is, Infernal Cry, it's not up all the time, right? It has a pretty long cooldown, 5.7 seconds in this setup. Pretty long cooldown, and the strength of the Covered in Ash also depends on how many monsters are around you and the strength of those monsters. Are they rare? Are they normal? Etc. And it's not a very consistent Covered in Ash, but it was a nice damage bonus, and the explodey effect is really, really nice. If you're kind of overwhelmed with a big pack of monsters, you pop that and boom, the whole screen just explodes. Feels really good. However, Infernal Cry is being totally changed, so it doesn't give us Covered in Ash anymore, I think, at all, and it doesn't give us explodey for our spells anymore. So we are removing that entirely from the build, and we are replacing that now with Enduring Cry with auto exertion support. So that's what we're doing right now, is Enduring Cry. Now, instead of giving us a flat amount of life, it will regenerate a percentage of life per power. Without Enduring Cry, I have only 137 life regen per second, but with it, it goes up to 492, which is now nearly 15% of our life per second. So that actually feels really good. Not to mention, it is also giving us endurance charges. Now, it's not going to be 100% uptime of endurance charges. You'll notice that I very specifically don't have it checked at all. You know, if they are turned on, you can assume that on average, maybe you have 1 to 2 endurance charges on average, but sometimes you have 0, sometimes you have 3. I'm just leaving it checked off because it's not 100% uptime. Same thing. That's why we keep the flasks off and we keep our steel skin off. Endurance charges are turned off right now, but you can see when they are on. These will generally be on, I think, when you are mapping in high density. You can see your defenses get, much more comfortable, a decent percentage more comfortable, right? About 20% or so. So that feels pretty good. All right, next up. Oh, also, because we're losing Infernal Cry, and then that gives us no longer an access to Covered in Ash, we are now switching out the Profane Proxy entirely. And actually, the original version of the build didn't use Profane Proxy. I originally was using Profane Proxy to apply a curse 100% of the time. The nice thing about that is it allows us to use this Curse Mastery for cursed enemies do 40% reduced extra damage from critical strikes. That also has the benefit of the Eye of Malice is stronger as you're mapping. However, I think there is more benefit to instead running Playeric Devastation. This is multiple fold in terms of what it gives us in terms of value. Number one is actually just removing the Profane Proxy. We now get back our chill aura, which is really nice. Just having the enemies chilled all the time. Really good defensive layer. Granted, we do chill with our Frostblink, but it's not like a really strong, high uptime chill. And having, a very consistent chill on bosses all the time, just really good defensive layer. And the Playeric Devastation kind of gives us a 100% uptime of a very strong Covered in Ash, which is great. Increased duration of ailments, and then kind of an unsung hero here a little bit is the increased global critical strike chance. One of the problems is trying to get enough crit chance for Elemental Overload. You'll notice right here, I have a 10% crit chance on the fire traps, which is a little bit lower than I would like. If you can squeeze in a suffix right here, actually I do have it. Okay, never mind. So you do really want a suffix here with critical strike chance. You can see this goes up to 13%. Still not godlike, but that's enough now where during a boss fight, if you're throwing your fire traps, you kind of just want to be spamming your fire traps. There's nothing else to do when it's off cooldown and you're just waiting for the boss to get a big ignite on it, because you really want to activate your Elemental Overload. There's a few ways that you could squeeze in a little bit more crit chance. You could drop the Topaz Flask here for a Diamond Flask instead. Topaz Flask is just for a little bit more defense. It's not like godlike defense, but it is pretty decent combined with the Lightning Coil. That's my recommendation right there. Consider that. Get a little bit more crit chance with the Diamond Flask. Better uptime of your LE Overload, but really not game-changing, not the biggest thing in the world. Playeric Devastation gives us a little bit more crit chance. A little bit more uptime of that will be a little bit more comfortable. So yeah, that's the other thing that we're doing. Thing to note is Playeric Devastation. I don't think it's going to be too expensive looking at what the meta is shaping up to be. In the past, there have been metas where Playeric Devastation has been very desired. That is also very specifically why in the mid-league start POB or drop-down, I do not have the Playeric Devastation. It can be a little annoying to drop. It drops from the Black Sun or whatever that boss is, the mini boss for Exarch. So that's not a very, very common drop, but if it's not desired, it does get pretty cheap pretty early. So just be aware of that. That's why I'm only putting it in the end of league start scenario, but it is a very nice ring to have. All right, next up, Taste of Hate is now trash. It got changed in a way that very, very few builds are ever going to use it. It got absolutely dumpstered. So that is going off the table. That opens up the ability to use a different flask. Obviously, later on, we would want to add in Progenesis and everything and all that. Like, I guess I could just toss it in here. This is like the high end. This is the high end version. If you're crazy, then sure, go for it. Toss in a Progenesis. You can put it right here. Sure, that looks great. That looks beautiful. Progenesis for you. At the very high end, sure, you want to go for Progenesis, but what it really does is it opens up the ability to use a Topaz Flask. You can use a Diamond Flask, like I said. You can use a Quartz Flask. Whatever feels good to you. You could even consider running Determination and Granite Flask. Entirely options that are possible, but there is no just obvious, very good flask to use to replace the Taste of Hate with. So really quality of life, whatever direction you want to go with that. And then last up, Herald of Ash and Dark Arts are two things that we used to use during leveling. Those are just gone. But the nice thing is we can buy Shield Charge after breaking some eggs. That's going to feel really good. And because of that, I also recommend using a shield for leveling instead of dual wielding now. You're going to lose some damage, but just being able to shield charge around instead of running through Act 2 and 3, just walking is going to feel much, much better. And I do recommend that. And let's see. And then last up, if you have played this build in the past, but you didn't keep up with it this previous league, I have made some changes. And with the version that I played this league, I was actually able to farm T17s, and I did all of the Uber challenges in it, the T17 boss challenges, the conditional, like don't get hit challenges. I was able to do them on this build at higher investment. And some of that is thanks to some of the changes this league. First up, Legacy of Fury is absolutely godlike. We do want to go into these ASAP. In the past with Righteous Fire, these have been a few divines for the first few days. However, this previous league, they were like 10 chaos because with the RF people not playing them, it was not meta, and these were very, very cheap. These boots are incredible. You get a permanent Scorch, which stacks with Eye of Malice really nicely, and this actually works really well with the loss of Infernal Cry, is we just get a permanent pseudo explodey with these scorched enemies burning, just doing AoE burning. And since we are scaling fire damage over time, the burn from Legacy of Fury is very, very strong for us. And it's a very powerful, clear boot that I just think is necessary to play the build. And then the other very notable change is we want to switch into Fire Trap of Blasting eventually. The very big thing about Fire Trap of Blasting, and I missed this, this was my mistake. If and Jeff helped me out on this, because I just didn't do the math properly when I first looked at it, is the added fire damage against burning enemies is very large. Like I was previously looking at the old Fire Trap where it has a higher base damage but less added. This one has less base but more added, but it's almost like the same number. The big thing is because of the effectiveness of added damage, that multiplier scales against the added fire damage. What that means is if the enemy is already burning, you always want to throw at least 2 fire traps. The first fire trap will make them burn, and then the second one will get that added damage because they are already burning. And Fire Trap of Blasting gets a much bigger multiplier on that added damage. That added damage is much bigger. So the actual damage that it does is much higher. Side benefit is because it is no longer inherently inflicting a burning ground. So regular Fire Trap, bigger initial damage, but smaller added. However, it has a built-in damage over time. This is really, really good at low level, but this kind of falls off because it doesn't really scale too much later on. This is really nice, but this burning damage is like, it's fine. It's just a burning ground effect on the ground. And you can see this if you throw the fire traps, maybe go over here. When the fire traps go off, you'll see that it leaves a burning ground effect right there. So you can see that burning ground effect. And that burning ground effect, it doesn't scale that much. It's really good until like, level 20. But when we start pushing higher levels, like my fire trap here is what, level 31, right? It kind of falls off on how it scales. It also is flat. Like it doesn't scale with the ignite. It's just a flat number. Whereas if we go to Fire Trap of Blasting, we have, because of this 1316 is now multiplied times 260, we get a much bigger ignite. The ignite here is the same size as the regular fire trap plus the burning ground. Then we get the benefit because there is no inherent burning ground, we can now use Flame Surge. We can't use Flame Surge on regular fire trap, but now we get to inflict a burning ground based on the size of the ignite. So we get an additional 25% damage. So that's basically 25% more damage than regular fire trap by using Fire Trap of Blasting. And so what we're going to be doing is in the POB, you'll notice that we are now using Flame Surge here. And I have both curses as well as Flame Surge in an Arcanist brand set up. So you're going to drop that Arcanist brand before the boss comes out, throw your fire traps. Always throw at least 2 fire traps, but I do recommend keep spamming it until you get that Elemental Overload proc just for another 40% more damage. And yeah, you should be very, very comfortable. That is, I believe, all of the changes. Oh, the other thing is tattoos, as far as we know, are core. It's possible that tattoos are not core. If they are, then I recommend using them. Big thing is we can use the Vlaco Storm Rider. This lets us get our lightning res up, which is very, very, very helpful for using the lightning coil, which has -60. Is it -60? Yeah, -60 to lightning res. We can make up for that very comfortably by just using some Vlaco Storm Rider tattoos. Luckily, they're int tattoos because we are no longer... I still recommend using Eldritch Battery, but because we're not using Divine Blessing, we don't need as large of an energy shield pool, right? We only need just enough to cast our main skills. So EB is just really comfortable for us now. And so we can use the Vlaco Storm Rider, get our lightning res up. We can really drop our int much, much lower. You can see that I'm using quite a few tattoos here. I have 4 tattoos for lightning here, and then I have 10 Rango Karai turtles. Now, this is all assuming that tattoos go core. It looked like it is from the announcement trailer, but we're not 100% sure. If tattoos are not core, then, you know, you can't use them. But if they are core, do recommend fitting in also as many reduced extra damage from critical strikes. This will just feel really good for mitigating, you know, crits coming in from the enemies. And so I have 10 of these here for 50% reduced crits. And then this is 40% right here from cursed enemies for 90% total. And then if you really want to, you can fit in 2 more, right? Drop 2 of these lightning tattoos, get enough lightning res, and then you can do 2 more and be fully crit immune to cursed enemies, which is really nice. In addition, you can also use a couple, if you have some extra dexterity, you can also use a couple of the other tattoos. What's the name? The Ramako Shaman. That will give you 2% spell suppression per tattoo. However, this build really wants dexterity, so that's kind of hard to fit in. If you really want to, you could grab a dex node right here, and then you could drop 3 of these, right? You get 30 more dex, you could get 6% spell suppression for 1 point, which is okay. I think that's an okay trade-off if you want to do that. The other thing is, for spell suppression, you do really want to keep this capped. You want it 100% without lucky. At the lower investment setup, we do, so yellow maps in a red right here. This is our, you'll see we have a bunch of different trees walking you through the axe, and then we have white maps, yellow maps in a red. It's a rough estimate, right? I think it goes to like level 88, you know, into red maps. And then the last one is like, hey, what do I do at level 100? The most notable thing is until you have 100% spell suppression, just be very, very careful about your spell suppression. Until you have 100%, use this lucky, right? The lucky mastery, if you look right here, I'm at 78% spell suppression. Boom, go up to 95 effectively. It rolls twice, takes the better number. So that's a really, really good thing to use until you have 100%. But then as soon as you have 100%, you know, through a little bit of your gear, there's also a lot of passives. You can go into Mage Bane, you can go through reflexes here. You can even temporarily take Instinct if you need some extra spell suppression there. You can take tattoos, like I said. Just really make sure you hit that 100% spell suppression without lucky. So that gives you the actual true 100%. You never take any unexpected damage. And yeah, I think that's all the changes. I love this build. I think you will have a great time. Like I said, most important thing is just make sure you use your Frostblink properly. Just use it properly. Make sure you're blinking into the enemies, you know, through a pack of monsters. Get that really fast cooldown. It'll be a fun, great, strong, effective build that I really believe that you'll enjoy. This is like old trusty. This is meat and potatoes. If you're worried about having an unsuccessful build or, you know, something that's not going to work out and you just really want to have a safe league starter, yeah, you can't go wrong with this one. All right. That's it for me. Updated POB will be below. Like I said, Maxroll guide will be tomorrow morning. I'll put the Maxroll guide in the links as soon as it's updated. That'll be tomorrow morning. I gotta eat dinner now. It's 10 o'clock at night. But yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you have a great league start, and I hope you guys join me on twitch.tv/retractum. All right, see you guys there. Bye-bye.